This is The Convergence.
Hi, folks. We're going to pick up where we left off with our conversation with Michael Muyot from Apex Polling. If you missed the first half of that discussion, you might want to go back and pick it up and listen to it. We talk a lot about DAOs and how Michael got started in it and what he's doing with polling exchanges. So what are the applications in this? I mean, obviously, we've talked about sort of shareholders. We've talked about voting structures. I mean, where do you see this going in the next 5 years? Or is it just, I was just talking to an analyst the other day and we were talking about 5-year financials and he's like, 5-year financials mean nothing anymore. It's more like 45 minutes is what I need to see because I just don't know what's going to happen with global wars and pandemics and all these things. Absolutely. So where do you see it going?
Yeah. So I think two big things, Derek. So one is the global supply chain. I think once you can actually use blockchain for that, you can cut out so much of the inefficiencies. Like 40% of the food grown in the world is thrown out. 40%, which is a massive, we talk about sustainability. Like it's massive in terms of growing that use of for water and for carbon and for transportation. So if we just solved organic food waste, that would put a huge dent in and of itself. I think the other part is the future of work, right? People love to talk about that. The Web3 makes it more exciting that corporations and cubicles, that whole business model where we're spending an hour commuting to an office to sit in a cubicle, that's done. That's over.
Yeah,
and it is. Accelerated that. But you needed something like Web3 and all these other tools that people can still be productive members, but it's at their pace. It's at that level of comfort. There's, it's going to evolve the gig economy of working for, again, the man at a certain hourly rate, like, we're working together. So it's going to be like more like-minded folks collaborating together to solve problems or to create a certain lifestyle. I think the way that people live in terms of housing is definitely going to change because this whole struggle, like everyone wants people to be renters, but they also want to own a home. And I think that the type of communal living where, it may be a different outlook in terms of the way they build houses, instead of having just one nuclear family, you could have 12 people living in there, but that house needs to be built differently. Right? That's
very good. And listen, I grew up in central Pennsylvania. You live in New York. You've seen, in central Pennsylvania where I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, it was very common. Entire sections of town were houses that looked like one house from the front with 2 different front doors and then 2 different basement access doors to apartments that are in the basement. So it looks like the same house with the lawn, the whole entire thing, but there's 4 units in each one of those. And that was, that was just from a different time. That was in the 1920s where that was built. But the deeds were all separated. My dad had one and we had to sell one time. And it was like trying to dig through all this paperwork of who owns the bottom quarter unit and who owned this. And it was just a disaster, but I could see how this could revolutionize that, even in property ownership, mortgages, title, all those things could be modified by this.
Exactly. So think about it like all of the things that we have to do as humans, right? Just to get through the day in terms of our dry cleaning and groceries and cars and insurance. Imagine if all that stuff we didn't have to worry about. We already had all the contracts that, yes, I can live here, but also with my NFT package, I already have places I can stay in Hawaii and Costa Rica, and it's done. I don't need to even go make a reservation. I just have to okay, that's my NFT. Here's my certificate. Book my room, and then fly down there. So every day, you have to go to the grocery store and you have to pick out all the things that you buy all the time, as opposed to all right, it's already set up with an NFT contract. I just get my delivery. So a lot of the things that we waste time
You're blowing my mind. I always feel like every day I'm looking for that one little opportunity that you can just pull the string on and go out and create some new innovation. And I think you just gave me like 60 of them. And I'm just like, I'm still thinking about the dry cleaner. And I'm like, wait, every time I pick up, I don't have to pay. It would just automatically, when it leaves their facility, it would automatically deduct it from my account.
Yep.
Like just the transaction of standing at the counter and doing that isn't necessary. There doesn't need to be anybody there. When I physically remove it from the store, it automatically deducts it from my account. And it could be a franchise, and that franchise would automatically get their franchise fee.
Yep.
You sort of got me dumbfounded in thinking about this.
The same thing with transportation, right? Like Zipcar was ahead of their time, but they didn't have the technology. But that time, like cooperative, like I can just go to the train station, zap a card, do something on my app, and I get in. The city bike, like all those modes of transportation are going to be more efficient and more optimized, depending on my lifestyle and where I go and live.
So what's what's your play in this? How do you all operate? Do you operate like a polling and data company, or is this a technology that you're licensing and selling? What's the business model behind what you're doing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So there's different elements. So what's nice is there's a retail side of it where we're interacting with people directly, like everyday American
right.
folks. And
yes,
we're getting information from them, but we're always either giving them education so they can improve their knowledge, critical thinking skills, as well as their marketable skills. They're going to be learning valuable marketable skills. We'll also give them the opportunity to create content. So all those Schoolhouse Rock type videos, we're paying professional voiceover artists and they get residuals through the NFT. So every time someone watches or downloads that NFT, they get paid. So we're always trying to put money in people's pockets because everybody's hurting. On the commercial business side, we have the NFTs to all of our data and analytical products that media companies subscribe to, that political campaigns subscribe to, the special interests. They don't get access to our raw data, but they can have our analytical information.
You can get a query on the back end of it, right? Or you can do a report for that industry. And okay, that makes sense.
Absolutely. So the business model is, it's kind of like a quasi Robin Hood effect, right? So we're taking money from those, but always giving everyone value, right? So we're getting money through the NFTs for the media and the political consultants, and then they're getting valuable analytics of unique data that they don't have access to right now. And then we're reinvesting that in communities and content creators, and we're also educating and paying regular day people to provide the service of their informed perspective, their opinions on and on focus groups.
I see. So that makes sense. And this is so cool. I really enjoy I just like the whole sort of concept of not completely knowing where the industry is going, but knowing how it can disrupt really everything.
Like I said, we're in the air, flying the plane, but still building it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the entrepreneur's dream, of not having to worry too much about where we're going to end up, but knowing as long as we're aiming in the right direction. That's pretty amazing. So what are some of the maybe use cases? I know, and I'm looking at some of the things that you sent me, and there's so many different areas like coins. I mean, how could you use coins in this environment as well?
Right. So, I mean, as a platform, obviously, just like Clash of Clans, we'll have our own tokens. So the key is the swap. So those have intrinsic value within our platform. Do they have value outside the platform? So, and you have to be able to swap that. I think for us, we want people to focus less on the coins and tokens, which are much more transactional to do things, as opposed to leveling up, which means I've achieved something in terms of either knowledge or action. So it's much more results based. As you level up, you get a bigger reward. And then
I'm looking for something on my. I didn't want to interrupt, but I have it laying here someplace, and I can't find it right now. I worked with a company years ago. This is 15 years ago that issued mission coins. When you successfully completed a project, let's say it's $1 million installation at this company, or it's a review of all the processes in the company and applying lean, they would have a coin minted, and you would get this presentation coin. And I guarantee every one of the ones that I ever got are still laying on this desk 15 years later, because it was a currency in and of itself. It had no value outside of that organization. So one of the things that we found were that people would have presentation cases in their office that have all these beautiful coins in them that were lighted with little LED lights and the whole, backlit and on felts and these things. But that currency was very valuable in that community of that company, but it was also really valuable to the people. Because every time you looked at it, you had that sort of memorial of the lessons that you learned from that. And that's something that comes out of the military. Special forces do these mission coins. And as you're talking about this, it reminds me of that, because I don't know, and with the work we did with Green Nurture, we were trying to take these actions, these small changes that you were pledging to make, and turn them into a commodity through Recycle Bank, through Ron Gonen at Recycle Bank, and come up with an exchange rate between those. The funny thing was, people liked that, but they rarely, if ever, redeemed them. They liked more the earning of the coin. They liked to earn it more than they liked to use it, which I think is a clever thing that we've learned about gamification of processes like this.
Totally. So it reminds me of something else. So as you get to that level, you'll unlock another challenge, and that challenge gives you the ability again to win something. So we always want to be able to give away cash and prizes, because that's
Sure.
what makes it fun. Even
Yeah.
it could be $50 or it could be 500. People love trying to compete for money, but you could also give away a new iPad Air or a flat screen TV. You have to make it fun. But unless you get to that level, you can't unlock that challenge. You can't win. So that's how you keep people like really.
So you gotta keep climbing that ladder of education. That's amazing.
Education, and results. So it could be
right.
You did this and you showed proof that you did it. Whether it's like worked on a campaign. Again, part of civics is I volunteered at a polling station. That's 8 hours that you get paid like $20 for, but maybe we can reward you on top of that, because 8 hours is worth more than $20 for anybody.
Yeah. So it's, and you just said a really interesting phrase, because it's a phrase that I hear from everybody that I talk to about that. And that is proof of work. And proof of work, to me, when somebody explained proof of work of what blockchain does and how this proof of work works, it made me really realize, okay, that's where this game is. It's that. So maybe you can explain proof of work. I don't know how much your background is in the blockchain and understanding proof of work, but I think you'll have a perspective on it from the work that you do.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to claim to be a blockchain expert, but I can understand complex technologies and help interpret it.
Yeah.
So proof of work is actually pretty much what it sounds like. It gives really complex mathematical problems to solve that only a computer could do. And that's also the plus and the minus. It's impossible to hack. It's impossible to like cheat or get around. You have to solve it. So they have all these computers, in this air-conditioned room just solving this stuff. It's brilliant on one hand, but it's completely inefficient and wasteful on the other, because you're using electricity, and unless that electricity comes from a clean and renewable energy source, no good, no bueno, right?
Yeah.
So that was again genius, but the solution is twofold. One, you can do that for Bitcoin, but you don't need that for everything else. You could do proof of stake, you can do proof of authority, you can do proof of impact. There's like 14 different.
So say that again. What was the first one that you said? I missed that. Proof of
work, proof of stake, proof of authority. And there's many others, but those are three of the very popular ones. So Cardano, ADA runs, and Ethereum is switching over to proof of stake. So Cardano did that at the get-go, proof of stake. So I have skin in the game. I own these coins. I get to vote. The problem is it's a little bit, inequitable that the more coins I have, the richer I am, the bigger my vote counts. So I'm not completely down with that either. So I think there's a combination in there, but it depends on the circumstance. There's no one size fits all. Proof of authority means I did something, right? I have the authority because I'm in the game. I've proven myself. We could use it like I've achieved this level. Proof of authority. It's not authority in the government sense.
But no, I know exactly right. It's almost like a degree or something you hang on your wall. It's essentially saying a third party has said that I've done this. And that's what I like about this whole blockchain thing, is because it does provide that transparency and eliminates the counterfeit side of this.
Right. So, and you can have things, like I said, you may want to be completely autonomous with no human involvement. Like we're quasi in between. So we're a federated consensus model with some proof of authority in there, because we have a closed environment, but all of our data and everything is still on the blockchain. And then our platform is a layer 2 solution.
I like that word, federated consensus model. I would have to talk to an economist and an analytics person for that word to ever come up again in a conversation. But it's really, it explains itself though.
It does. And again, this great environment, Derrick, is everything is transparent. All the rules are there. So there's no hidden agenda. Like this is what we're doing. This is how you qualify. This is how we're set up. It's very, very transparent, which I think is going to allow things to be more sustainable. There's no hidden bylaws or anything. Everything is completely transparent and can be found in text or on blockchain.
Well, I say this all the time in workshops that I do: to be unclear is to be unkind. And when you as a leader aren't clear with somebody what your expectations are and what the deliverables are and all those kind of things, you're the asshole in that equation. Because when somebody doesn't know what's expected of them and what the rules of the game are, it's impossible for them to perform at any standard. So what you're saying is this provides that level of transparency, so that there is that proof of work. It certifies that transaction, which I think is really important, and it gives people transparency and clarity to know that what they're doing is actually it makes a difference, and it has some sort of value to it too, which I think is important for folks.
Right.
So where's your first sort of rollouts of this? Where you're coming out of development stage right now, right?
Yes, we're still in beta right now. So we'll have another couple of weeks. We'll do a soft launch at the end of this month, and then we're going to do a very public hard launch, in May, where we're shouting it from the rooftops.
So how do people find out about what you all are doing? Is there a website to go to, or is it are you still sort of under the radar? How does that work?
Still under the radar. So
okay. Well, they can Google you though, and they'll find you all over the place. There's a really good looking dude behind you when you rang the bell at NASDAQ too. As it looks very similar to me. This was really good. I'd really love to have you back too, because I think as you get launched in the marketplace and more use cases come around too, we should talk about that. I think the final thing I would like to talk about just for a couple of minutes is this carbon footprint thing, because it's a big deal for me, recognizing that there is a carbon footprint to what we're doing here with NFTs and with blockchain. And although it's almost like replacing, the horse with the automobile, there is that transitional period where, the carbon footprint of it might be larger than it should, but I think eventually it'll come down. And, that's why I'm a big proponent too. I'm a very sort of libertarian. I'm like, carbon credits are a solution because you're paying somebody else to offset it, in that equation. And it might not be the best solution long-term, but the better solution might be to reduce or find better ways, but it becomes that sort of bridge. So let's talk about that carbon footprint. What are you hearing on your side from the environmentalist community about the carbon footprint of blockchain and all these technologies?
A lot of uninformed opinions, unfortunately. So the first thing they hear that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Mm-hmm. And then they just kind of do that without really diving into it. And I think that, some of that is misconceptions or misinformation from folks that don't want that to succeed. So put that aside. The facts are 51%, and this number changes daily, 51% of Bitcoin is being mined by renewable energy. So
interesting.
That's much higher than when you tell people that, they're like, really? Because their perception is like 10% or less. And that's actually not true. So when China, when all the mining folks stopped doing that in China, and many of them moved to the United States, they went to places like West Virginia, Alabama, and and Miami and Texas. And when they're building a new facility, they're going to use as much clean renewable energy as possible because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Well, I've also seen in Texas, there's some companies now that are setting up Bitcoin mines beside oil wells, because the natural gas that just comes out of an oil well naturally from the process, they don't have pipelines there to pipe that into the supply chain. So they've been flaming it and burning it off into the environment. Well, these companies are sitting there and saying, hey, we could take that natural gas, generate electricity, generate Bitcoin with it. And at least we're using that energy for something positive versus it just being burned off into the environment.
Exactly. And I think that, so there's Bitcoin, right? And the mining of that. Then there's Ethereum, which is transitioning over to proof of stake. But by them being on proof of work, be like, okay, now there's another thing that's not good for the environment.
Sure.
But they recognize that, and they heard all the flack, and they're switching over. So I think it's important for the folks coming up to be cognizant of the carbon footprint. And I don't think there's enough conversation around that. Yeah. So one, there's from the platforms and all the mining, but there's also just from all the new businesses starting up, embedding that into the impact. So you could say, okay, let's say we're doing a new NFT. You could say, what is going to be my impact? Is it going to be net positive or net negative?
Yeah.
And I think that conversation has to be put at the forefront so that people.
Yes, it does. Well, and just to give that shameless plug to my sponsor, because that's what they're doing. They're creating a platform that you can connect your NFT to theirs and get a smart contract that offsets the carbon of that NFT. But I also heard a really interesting thing the other day. I was talking to an artist who had launched an NFT collection, and he said, I was really surprised when I started getting hate mail on Instagram. And I think his response, out of not truly understanding sustainability, I think his response was very genuine. And he said, can you explain to me the difference between me having this minted, in a blockchain, or me going out, having somebody cut down a tree to make a frame, make canvas, source 25 different colors of paint from all sorts of different places around the world, petroleum based, having those things shipped here, brushes, Sharpies. He's like, right. Is it similar or is it different? And he's like, it's funny because they didn't reply. I think but it's really easy to pick on it when you're just like, well, look, it just did it right there. And we can see the carbon footprint of that, forgetting about the entire global supply chain that goes into painting something like this.
Right. Yeah.
And I think as we evolve, I think we'll better understand a year or so from now what the carbon footprint really is. But to your point, 51% coming from renewable energy, that's saying something. I think there's a trend moving in that direction.
Right. And then once Bitcoin hits that 21 million, they're going to stop. So
so if anybody doesn't understand that, if Bitcoin mining is really, it's interesting. And I have a miner I'm trying to get on the show. Some of these miners, I have to tell you, they want to like have a bag over their head while they're talking to you. They don't want people to know what they're doing. And this guy is super like just under the radar. But I didn't realize that Bitcoin, if you think about it, Bitcoin, there is a maximum of Bitcoin that can exist, and that's 21 million Bitcoin. And once that happens, it's over. There's no more supply. But if the demand increases, that changes things. So that is really different. And if you think about it like the finite resource, I do think that was really clever of them to look at their commodity, Bitcoin, as a finite resource that eventually would run out. It's not a fiat currency where they can just pump and dump trillions into the economy.
Yeah, so it's going to get super interesting. And that's why, Bitcoin, it's an asset, it's a currency, like it's multiple things because they don't have the rules yet. Right. So if you go into El Salvador, right, they made it the
national currency.
And then they avoid taxation. What are they doing? Tons of people are moving to El Salvador. So they're using that as an economic development, growth and attraction strategy. And it's working.
Wow.
It's working. So there's tremendous potential in South America and Southeast Asia. And a lot of I think, I don't get into political discussion, but when I was looking at early on, a lot of the immigration, people were leaving, some of their because they didn't have enough opportunities. And the only other is like go work for the gangs because of climate change. They weren't getting the regular temperatures. They weren't getting the rainfall. They couldn't grow what they've done for decades. So they were forced to move as opposed to saying, well, here's new forms of economy until you settle out. So you're not depending on just one industry. So having multiple industries in South America and Southeast Asia is going to be tremendously beneficial just from this unplanned migration. Like you should move because you want, because you have to.
I think that's another piece. And I really do think this will turn into a couple episodes, this one that we've recorded, because there is a piece I didn't understand till the other day. I never really thought about the fact that every time I use my credit card, there's a transaction fee with Visa and MasterCard. And most people in the emerging world live on less than $1 a day. So what grocery store in a community in Nicaragua is going to accept credit cards? They're just not. Right. Because the entire transaction would be taken up in fees. But with crypto, that doesn't have to be the case. You can have a fraction of a cent that becomes a transaction fee, and thus giving a digital currency, the ability to use credit cards and those kind of things to people who've never had that opportunity before, which means they become bankable, which means they can get loans, which means they can acquire property. I think it's a radical change to the entire global system.
Absolutely, Derrick. So you just remind me of something. I think we talked about the first time. What they're doing in Africa with Cardano is revolutionary. Their first time in, they got 5 million people in Ethiopia onto their platform. They connected with the mobile bank telephone, right? So now instantly 5 million people now have a digital ID. They can open a bank account on their phone and they can own property. They couldn't do that before because they didn't exist. So having them own land and take out a loan is literally a game changer. And they're going to track everything along the way. And the people agreed to that, obviously. Like they're going to track their educational level, their careers, their carbon footprint. So, I mean, the opportunities for sustainability at the molecular level in the most positive way is now possible for these 5 million people. And they're just going to go throughout Africa, continuing trying to uplift them and give them these opportunities and this economic sovereignty.
That is truly amazing. I'm going to leave it at that. I can't believe we talked almost an hour. I feel like there's like so much to unpack in this one conversation. I'd love to have you back, especially closer to launch, and let's talk more. I just think there's so much opportunity here that it does take a while to really understand it. And like you said, you're a smart guy and spent 2 years just reading all the books. Maybe, do you have a suggestion on a book? What's a good book to maybe get a little bit more basics? Any you can think of off the top of your head?
So there's a great one on the basics of blockchain. And I think this is another one that I really love about meta skills.
Okay. I haven't read that yet either. I will, I'll pick it up and educate myself. Do I get any sort of tokens or anything for reading that?
Yes. 100 tokens.
Yeah, 100 tokens right there. Michael, thank you so much. Folks, if you would like to find Michael, the best thing to do is Google him. His last name is Muyot. And you can find him on LinkedIn. And I'm sure as the site and everything becomes more public, you'll find lots of press releases and things out there. And go check out the work that he's done in the past too. It's truly amazing. And I'm always excited to have conversations with you about the future of where we are going with our world and with our climate. So, hey, thanks again, Michael. Appreciate you very much.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.